when you think about the number of stresses, what the scientists call forcings, we call them human impacts, they call them anthropogenic forcings on the Earth's systems. It's such a wide range of activities now that it can't be summarized either as pollution or conservation. We're filling the atmosphere, as everybody has come to know, though not everybody has come to believe. We're filling the atmosphere with greenhouse gases, most importantly CO2. That's changing the climate. That's going to have a pervasive global effect on water in countless crucial ways. In melting of the ice sheets, in melting of the glaciers, in changing precipitation patterns, and changing evaporation and transpiration of water. We are changing land use all over the world to grow food. It's estimated now that humanity has appropriated, as the ecologists use the term, nearly half of all of the primary photosynthesis on this planet. For us, for one species out of the perhaps 100 million species. That, by the way, is pushing millions of species off the planet because we're taking it for us and it's not being left for the countless other species in the countless other ecosystems that are being impacted. We are polluting, as you said, with toxic chemicals so that in our own water supply throughout the United States, we have great threats, but in China, a country of 1.3 billion people, there's hardly a city which isn't in a dire emergency with a desperately polluted water supply at this point. We are putting nitrogen in massive amounts onto the soils of the world to try to grow enough food for 7 billion people. That's not, strictly speaking, a pollutant the same way some of the human-made compounds are. It's a natural cycle, but humanity's overtaken the natural nitrogen cycle. I raise all of these different aspects, and I could go on with countless others, to emphasize one point, which is that anything we talk about tonight on water has 5 or 10 major interconnected pressure points, not just one. And it's an amalgamation that all comes back to a crowded and unprecedentedly prosperous planet on average, not for everybody, but for many people. And it's deranging the planet at this point. So it's conservation, it's depletion of groundwater, it's degradation of natural ecosystems that manage the water supply, it's the disappearance of the glacier water, which is a crucial source of irrigation flow and household water use for hundreds of millions of people. And it's a resource that will disappear in the next 50 years. So this is the complexity of it, and how far along are we in addressing any of it? Not very far. That's the problem.
Yeah. What about that, Peter?
Well, I just think the statistics are quite chilling, actually. I mean, 1 billion people, a little less than 1/6 of the world's population, lacks access to clean drinking water today. 2 million people die annually from unhealthy water conditions around the world. And according to the United Nations, 2/3 of the global population will be suffering at least intermittent water shortages by the year 2025, not that far down the road. So it's the statistics alone are quite chilling, actually.
Okay, I'll take a shorter shower. You know, I wonder, really, you know, this sort of sounds like the carbon issue with all of the pollution, and the people in the United States say, okay, I'll drive a Prius, but what about China and India? What are they going to do? And you sort of feel like that as an American too, with the rest of the populations of the world growing. Do they have the same sense of urgency about this that we do? What do you say?
Well, I think a key issue here is that the world, the developing world, which Professor Sachs knows more about than I, but they want to live like the Western world does. But as soon as you provide plumbing to these communities, their water use skyrockets. So I think there's a responsibility on the developing world, on the developed world, to help the developing world not make some of the same mistakes that we made and leapfrog some of these pollution and unsustainable habits that we've practiced by going straight to renewables and having water efficient water utilities and toilets and faucets and low flow shower heads and that sort of thing.
Is that what it's about? Is it about consumption? Is it about the way we use water? Is that what we want people to think about?
Well, John, you said that are they as concerned as we are? We haven't gotten very concerned as a country yet. We've actually not done anything yet on many of these issues. Climate change, the closest thing we've come to doing something is to elect a wonderful president who is going to do something finally. But we've, with this issue, which may become the paramount way that water becomes an absolutely threatened resource for much of the world, we've not taken a single step in this country yet, as a country, to face up to the issue. Now, let me talk about the other side of the world and the other end of the income spectrum. In the villages in Africa where we work in the Earth Institute at Columbia in partnership with local communities, they're not even thinking right now about catching up. That's not even a concept. They're thinking about trying to stay alive right now. And what are they seeing? They're the front end of the world's water crisis, because these are so-called subsistence communities, meaning that they have almost nothing. They're farm communities who plant, hope for the rains, and then survive on the food that they produce within the villages. So it's a subsistence community. And they are living in climates that increasingly are destabilized. And in these places where there aren't great rivers, which have defined so much of the civilizations of the world, or the Great Lakes, but where rain is the life giver or the life taker when it disappears, we're seeing more and more droughts. We're seeing more unpredictability. And the result is a combination of a massive rise of population on the one side and a massive decline of predictability and even average rainfall on the other. And it's like blades of a scissors. It's cutting very sharp right now, very close to the bone. And I'm seeing more and more I'm always seeing things that I never dreamt I'd see on the planet when I go to very poor communities. The human spirit is the one side, but people that are on the brink of utter disaster on the other. And I was just traveling in the villages about 6 weeks ago. Drought in Kenya, drought in Tanzania, disastrous food crisis in the southern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And this is a kind of phenomenon that is already upon us, but we haven't really recognized it. It's not us, it's them. And we think somehow it is something that is painful, but we don't have to consider it too much. But one of the things that I think we could talk about a little bit in the conversation is the fact that it's those places that turn to the conflict zones, which become the horrors where we get stuck, as we are in Afghanistan right now, a country that's had 5 years of massive drought. And it's not coincidental that they're destabilized and that we're seeing conflict and threat at the same time.
You see it the same way, Peter?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, we're as I've often said, we're leaving the century of oil. We're entering the century of water. And that's not to say that the cars are going to run on water, but that for the last 100 years, oil has been the defining natural resource. And that I think water will be as we get further and further into the next century. And it's these parts of the world where they're just getting by, where it's going to be the most brutal to watch. And that I do think there's a responsibility on the developed world to help these communities see this coming and do what we can to get them through it.